use the federal money to pay. The federal money? Could use the federal to pay for it. So 7:49, let's keep on this quarantine, COVID, and, frontliner thing. I wanted to bring Leah onto the show here. Leah's son, and we'll let you go ahead and tell the story, Leah. But Leah's son had come from the States, and let's just start from there. So he knew he was coming back to Guam. So did he get tested for COVID-19 in anticipation that he would need some type of paper that says, hey, I was tested, don't put me in quarantine?
Exactly. I mean, the point was to be prepared. So we had the executive order. We're following the rules. It basically says you have to produce medical documentation that you've tested, not positive, you tested negative for the COVID-19 virus. Now, that was it. There was no other specifics, what type of test, and, that sort of thing, other than it had to be within 72 hours of traveling in Guam. Mm-hmm. So my son lives in Las Vegas. He goes to UNLV. His uncle Paul lives in LA, and Paul found out that there's testing available at a private clinic, but you have to pay. But at least you get results really fast. Now, that was a blood test and for the antibodies. So basically that just tells you whether or not you've had COVID-19. And if it's negative, that means you're good. And you get this document that says you're negative. And we're trying to get things to move quickly because, my mother-in-law passed away on May 3rd, and we just needed them back as soon as possible. And so, we're thinking, okay, they're gonna be fine. But yet, when they arrived at the airport, there are 2 screening areas they went through. The first guy that spoke to them at the first station looked at their documents. He said, oh, you guys should be okay. This should be fine. Go over to the second station. When they evaluated their documents there, they kind of were unsure. They were like, well, we're not sure if this is going to be acceptable. Public health is closed right now. We won't know till tomorrow. Therefore, you have to go to the quarantine hotel. So, of course, that was confusing to them. Like, they obviously they're looking at their documentation and they're thinking, the screeners are thinking this isn't good enough. So they head over to the hotel, and I call my brother-in-law when he was already there. And I'm like, what happened? He's like, I don't know. They're telling us that tomorrow we have to email our documents to public health and that they have to review them. So, so much confusion. I'm like really upset. And then when they finally get a response from Kane Agan, I think is his name, at public health, he basically said, we are not accepting the antibody blood test as documentation. We want the nasal swab test. So, again, we're following executive order. It doesn't say anything about a specific nasal swab test as being the acceptable medical documentation. So they just basically told my brother-in-law and my son, you have to stay there. We're still evaluating. And so my brother-in-law's been emailing this guy several times last week, and I think spoke to him on the phone. And it's always the same response when Paul is trying to make a case that, we're here, my mom passed away. It says that, we should be able to be okay. And so the guy at public health just keeps telling him, what's pending, we're still reviewing. I mean, this is ever since last Tuesday now. So I'm like, I don't know what's the problem, right? So I was in other media shows. There was an interview on the Post that was published. The article was published on Saturday. On Friday, I finally got a call from Rebecca Respicio, who is the one who's in charge over there at the quarantine facility.
You mean a quarantine soldier?
Yeah, and
was she a soldier or a shepherd?
Shepherd, I think it's more like a shepherd. And so I've been leaving a message for her ever since Tuesday, and she didn't call me back. Finally, my girlfriend who works at public health called me Friday morning, and she's like, has anyone called you? And I'm like, no. I need to speak to Rebecca Respicio. And she's like, okay, let me have her call you. So luckily, she called me, right? This is Friday, and so I'm asking all kinds of questions. I said, why can't you let them go? I mean, in fact, that day there was an article in the PDN that says that there are several reasons why you can bypass quarantine. And one of them said there's a death in the family, so you can attend the funeral. So I brought that up to her. I said, it says it right there, and it was she quoted in the article. That was her story. Was about interviewing her, and she said, "Well, when is the funeral?" I said, "It's on May 29th." And she said, "Well, then there's plenty of time for them to finish the quarantine and still attend the funeral."
Not on May 29th. That's nothing. You got 14 days to do here.
I know. Well, I mean, my brother only has 3 weeks leave, so 2 of them will be spent in the quarantine. Besides, you know what she said after that? It really bugged me. She said, "Well, if the funeral was in 2 days, then we would release them so they can attend the funeral." I'm like, okay. So I'm thinking, so if you didn't even have a test, they're just going to release them, right? But my brother-in-law and my son had a test, and it's all negative, but they won't release them. That doesn't even make any sense, right? So, for example, say the funeral was in 2 days, and my brother-in-law arrived today, they would release them, and then they go to the funeral, they could be COVID-19 positive and infect everybody at the funeral. That's the logic? That doesn't even make any sense, right? So, again, I'm really, really confused. We have been asking, and I even called the Lieutenant Governor's office on Wednesday asking for help, and I was really upset because the assistant there claims, okay, we'll call Public Health Director Lyndon Dorsey tomorrow, and then I'll let you know what happens. Well, when he calls me the next day, I could tell he was lying. Well, we spoke to her, and he's like totally stumbling over his words. You know when someone's lying to you. And he's like, well, she said that, or they said there that she has to follow CDC guidelines, and we can't do anything. That's a bunch of BS. She can do something. It's all spelled out. First of all, the technicality.
I just got to say that they, in the case of the director of GITA, who I know as her mother had passed, they let her out right away. She didn't even have to go into the quarantine. And the reason why, Leah, was because Linda and Pinko DeNorsi had told us, we had asked her about this, and she had said that there were certain criteria. Then one of them was whether, and back then it wasn't death in the family. They would only had, if you had underlying behavioral mental health issues, or if you had a pre-existing comorbidities. Those were your get out of quarantine free cards. But as you are telling us, it's not being equally applied across the board.
No, it's not. You're exactly right, and that's what is so infuriating, right? Because why do some people get to be bypassed without having any tests at all? Yet here's my brother. He's actually had 2 tests. He had a swab test done, but he wasn't sure if the results were going to come in time for before he was planning on leaving, and that even came back negative. But his documents came when he arrived. But he took the swab test because, the antibody test, because he knew he would get those results right away, thinking this is actually going to be better because I should be cleared easily, right? So that this is my observation, Chris. You come to the airport, you go to the screening process. They're going to size you up. They're going to look at you, partly. I mean, this is human nature, okay? They judge you physically, and if you look like someone important, high profile, or whatever, they're already going to have this stereotype, like, okay, this guy's someone important, or they're going to look at you like, oh, this is kind of some ordinary average person, I mean, that's just human nature. That's what happens.
Right.
But the inconsistency is, shouldn't they already have some kind of standard in writing, like a little piece of paper?
Standard in writing.
Right? That says, when the person comes with this, you tell them this. When a person comes with, like, this is what acceptable, this is unacceptable, this is the procedure for someone, because they're going to question you, why are you here on Guam? Are you a resident? Are you, all those standard questions.
Right.
Yet they're just like making it up while they're there, and that is what is unfair.
That's what Leah,
I've been saying all week.
I just want to also state for the record, as you may well know if you follow the local news, the governor's former chief of staff, Anthony Mbabauta,
right.
Commonly known as Tony to his friends, Tony Mbabauta was allowed to spend the night at the Pacific Star because he wasn't feeling well, and then the next morning he was able to be released from the Pacific Star without taking a test or anything. He was quote unquote assessed by public health and released into the wild.
Yeah. To
But
spread all
so
these
so
ugly
it
germs, right?
again, I got to go back to that double standard. It appears that there's one set of standards for
Yes.
the high-ranking muckety mucks, and then another set of standards for the little people.
Yeah, and it's really unfair, and it just creates so much distrust and for people here on Guam, because now you're worried. I've had people ask me or tell me, Leah, you were following what's going on. We're really worried. And another friend texted me yesterday. She said, your story is on my WhatsApp group, but everybody's talking. Everybody wants to know what the government's going to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, I want to know what the government's going to do. I've been asking for a week. Why should I even be asking? It's like common sense. Just let them go. It's not like I'm asking for a favor. It's the fact of the facts. They both tested negative. They're here for death for a funeral in our family. What more do they want? Mm-hmm. They want more negative publicity? Hey, I can do that all day long on social media, and I've been doing it. Mm-hmm. Trust me, I've been doing it.
So Leah,
it doesn't make sense.
Leah, so your son, right? Your son and your brother-in-law, they took the test in Vegas. Was it through a drive? Oh, in Los Angeles.
It was LA. My brother-in-law who works there found out, and he'd been looking because all California residents actually can get a free test. That's already been given. So he had done that. That was the swab one, but it was going to take 5 days or whatever for the results. And so his friend of us said, hey, Paul, there's a private clinic in Beverly Hills. You pay $250, and you can get the antibody blood test and get your results in 15 minutes. And he thought, oh, this is really great. So he calls me and he tells me this. I'm like, hey, can Jonathan fly over to you, and then both of you can take the test together, and then should everything be okay, which it should, then you can fly to Guam together. That was the whole plan. I said, great. I want him to be with his uncle anyway. That's better that they travel together. So that's what they did.
And they had a certificate and everything?
Yes. There was a letter and
Leah,
actual lab results.
Can you send me the pictures on the WhatsApp of all those documents?
Yeah.
Sure. You know what also came back later was from, I guess, the public health guy was the fact that, well, this is not an FDA approved test site or whatever. It's like, again, technically in the executive order, none of that is stated.
Right.
It's not
I'm looking at the guideline. It just says the certificate must include results from a lab accredited by the WHO or CDC that an individual tested negative. It didn't even say what kind of test.
Yes.
Public health is aware that countries are developing a uniform certificate to satisfy legal requirements. No certificate has been pre-approved by public health at this time. Right. Additionally, the certificate must be in English.
Yeah.
Is your certificate in English?
Yes, it is.
Is it from a WHO and CDC certified?
I'm trying to find it. It's on the WhatsApp. I'm going to send it over to you.
It was in LA, so I'm assuming that maybe.
But the Joint Information Center in their press release yesterday, it talks about the mandatory quarantine, and now it says the traveler obtains a diagnostic specimen test, and that's in bold for COVID-19.
Well, Sabrina, they probably did that because they've been making a big stink about it for almost a week. Mm-hmm. That's why that came out. That's what I was telling people. Gee, I wonder how conveniently they decided to put this article out to finally give the specific details, because they're being pressured. This is Guam. What's happening to me? Everybody's talking about it, and they also want to know. My son has other friends that are flying in.
My mom is coming back next month.
Oh, well, better be prepared. That's why I put it out on Facebook. If you are going to be traveling, then be ready. You better make sure you have all this stuff done.
Make sure you have all your stuff done, Leah. Make sure you have all your stuff done. Jump through all the hoops, and then get ready to go into quarantine anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's what my son was saying. Mom, it's like it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter when you come in. If they're not sure, oh, you know what? Just go to the hotel, and then we'll let you know. What is that? Well, don't say.
Yeah, and then once you've checked in, it's like the old song, "You can never leave." Welcome to the hotel quarantine. Yeah.
And that's a pretty tight time frame, 72 hours, depending on where you travel from.
Hey, you know what, Sabrina? I got a text from a friend of mine, and she said that she knew of someone that arrived on Guam, and they looked at the timestamp on his test. He missed it by 2 hours. They stuck him in quarantine. Seriously. They're like, oh, I'm sorry, your test is showing that you're at 74 hours, so you missed the deadline.
Here
so
we
therefore-
we have a comment from
Wow.
Ellen Leah. Understand the requirement is 14 days. Why is it so hard for the people in public to understand 14 days is not that bad? We already have been on this island quarantine for 2 months. What is 14 days? Dalai people.
You know, when you have the way our family is, we're only few. I don't have any family on my side. My husband's family is basically his dad and him. And so then there's me and my 2 boys, right? So the day that my mother-in-law passed away, we were literally on her deathbed. She was breathing her last breath. Paul and Jonathan, you know, in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, were on video calls. So we were all there together in that sense. And just telling our mom, grandmother, you know, we love you, before she passed. It was very emotional. Imagine you on the video call watching, you know, your grandma, my poor son, I could see him crying his eyes out. His roommates are going, what is happening? You know, going through all the emotional stuff. And then it's like, you know, we were trying to bring both of them out, you know, over the last month or so because we knew she was pretty much going to be passing very soon. But knowing all these difficulties that we were going to be expecting, it was just too hard. So when she finally passed, it's like, okay, we got to get them over here now. And then to be counting this problem, we haven't even had the time to grieve properly, seriously. And that's what's really sad. It's like, do these government officials, public health officials, have any compassion? I mean, really? You're letting some people go that even haven't had a test, but these guys have had tests, yet they're just ignoring us.
Yeah,
You know what's interesting is the Physicians Advisory Group. They recommended to the governor just last week that they release people that are arriving from local residents that are returning from to Guam, or if they came from the CNMI, or if they came from anywhere in the U.S. mainland, that they do home quarantine.
Exactly.
But yet this release comes out.
Yes, and that's what I don't understand. I mean, that's why I'm hoping that by being vocal in the media, especially today after everything else, you know, I call out Linda DeNorsi. She better give me a good reason why those people who are managing the people in the quarantine that we're appealing our case to have been ignoring us, when we have every right to just say, you know what, let them go.
Mm-hmm.
They should not be there in the first place. You let other people go that haven't even had any tests at all. You don't even know if they are positive, right? So why do you keep them? That doesn't make any sense. And I challenge anyone in the government. I mean, the governor, the lieutenant governor, really, the legislature, anybody who can have a heart and say, you know what, let those 2 go. They don't deserve to be there. You know, that doesn't make sense. And so this is the issue. So many people, like I said, are following this. They're scared. From my son's friends who are coming from off island for the summer, some of them are living in cities that don't even have access to testing, so they don't have a choice, right? They're going to come here already prepared to quarantine, right? Then you have people who, like, say their family, like you said, your mom's coming, whoever. Now they're all worried. They're like, what's going to happen to my family member that's going to be here in a couple of weeks? Are they also going to have the same treatment? You know, I mean, why is this uncertainty there? There shouldn't be uncertainty, and I'm glad that the doctors came out and said that. But will the government officials, public health, listen to what the doctors are saying? I mean, really, we haven't had a serious outbreak. Thank God for that. I can understand if it was worse, the worst situation possible, but it seems to me that we've been able to contain the situation. So
I want to read a quote here from...
I wonder if these directors and deputy directors are going to be on quarantine for 14 days.
Yeah.
After serving...
After being exposed, right? Good point.
I agree with that.
I just wanted to read this, and then we got to close because we're on the top of the hour.
Okay.
But this is something I had asked the Adelup Policy Director, Carlo Branch, about why we're not having a lot of press conferences anymore. And I just want to pull a little piece of what he said here. Like any other disaster, there's a shift in operational tempo from crisis response to recovery. So we're not, at least according to the policy director, really focused so much on the crisis response. We've already moved on to the recovery. But Leah, I mean, lastly, but I should have said it first, I didn't know that you had a death in the family. Our condolences going out to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We know it's very difficult for you during this time. And don't even get me started. We talk about double standards. Don't even get me started about the double standard for funerals if you work up at Adelude.
Okay.
Okay, so we thank you for your time. I know your message has gone out there. You know, you got my number. Send me some pics. Keep me posted,
will.
okay?
Send us a picture of the test.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm looking for it right now.
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
shoot it over.
Thank you,
Okay.
Leah.
Guys. Okay.
Take care.
Wash your hands.
I will.